We're about
Do 3 cars in a row, you see exactly what it.
you're about to go live.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah.
I gotta take that thing away.
No problem. I'll say then, this is the initial discussion.
But this session is very.
Yeah, you're gonna, still got 2 minutes, but you're gonna make sure to
Well,
announce
because
that
it takes time to
Mr.
get.
Gillespie's on the phone. That's right.
Actually does not.
Any word on the cheese?
Yes. Charge 659. Mr. Siebel.
What are you doing?
That's what it's called.
Yeah, no, I hear you. We're requiring council, but there's other council discussion.
Yeah, that's Matt.
Okay. Call the Nantucket regular town council meeting for November to order. Lisa, you want to call the roll?
Mayor Foskey,
Present?
Councilmember Blackson,
Present.
Councilmember Berger,
Present.
Councilmember Gillespie, Councilmember Marino, Councilmember Knopf,
Present.
Councilmember Oswald.
Present.
All members are present. We have a quorum, sir.
Mrs. Gillespie is joining us by phone or do that by our regulations, and she's, right, Nora, you're up, Belmont. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right, so she's here by phone, so, and she can vote. All right, pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, consideration and approval of meeting minutes from October 25th, 2021, regular town council meeting. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to the minutes? We have a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, sure. Public business, we have no public hearings are scheduled. Council discussion. First item of discussion is the discussion of the planning commission recommended changes to town code 38-77. And I think, Bob, you
Want me to handle that, Matt? You want to? What's
I'm
your
happy to
preference?
walk through it. Let's turn my volume down. Okay. So planning commission met with this since July through last month when they decided that this was the policy that they would recommend to council for their discussion, and that's what tonight is. So this is for discussion purposes only. No vote, no public hearing. If there's no material changes, what we'll probably do is schedule a public hearing for next month, and then you can either vote after that public hearing or most likely in January.
Yeah, I recommend we do the public hearing in January. December's gonna be.
I'm more than happy, this.
Well, let's talk about it, but that'd be my recommendation.
That's perfectly fine. So what I'll do is step through, each section. You'll notice that I did strike, bold, copy, everything underlined or red and underlined, depending if you have a color copy. Are changes to the existing code. The existing code is simply in black. Okay? All right. The paragraph number 2, the only change to bed and breakfast houses is that it requires the operators live on site. That was something that I think it was assumed that that's the case, but it wasn't called out, so I just made sure to add some clarity there. Starting with paragraph 3 in homestay, after the definitions of what a homestay is and that type of thing, it goes into Section A, which says that every short-term rental must obtain and maintain a special use permit from the town. Special use permits expire 3 years from the date of issuance. They must be reconsidered by town council following the application process in place at the time of the renewal request. The purpose for this was that we wanted to make sure that special use permits for Airbnbs or short-term rentals aren't given in perpetuity, that we have a chance to thoughtfully review how it's affecting the community and how it's affecting the town. And after 3 years, I think that that's an appropriate
Or
time.
how any one property might be problematic and you can deny the renewal.
You can do that. There's also there's a mechanism to do that in the policy at the end here. So there's a couple ways. Yep. The second one is basically saying that homestays are required to submit transient occupancy tax as per the code for tax. And if they either are idle for 12 months, meaning they don't have any activity for 12 months, or they don't submit TOT as defined, that could be, their special use permit could be rescinded at that time as well. The purpose for that was that we do have, we currently have 11 permits in town now. A couple of properties have sold and there's another one on the market. So those numbers are dwindling, but of the remaining, there are still a few who don't submit their TOT. So the question on the table, and I've asked them this when I sent them a letter for another reason, was if you could clarify the purpose of maintaining that permit. They can voluntarily surrender their permit at this point, but right now they're grandfathered in. So they're going to remain as the ability to run an Airbnb, even though they may not be running them. They still need to submit their TOT. That's code. So I'm starting to shake the tree a little bit on making sure that all of our Airbnbs are submitting the transient occupancy tax as
Do you want questions as you go or at the end?
I'm happy to entertain, as this is your discussion, not mine. I'm just sort of.
Okay, then I have a question. What is the penalty if they don't submit their top?
There's a late fee on the TOT, and then also there's. That's really it.
I have spoke with Airbnb owners who didn't even realize they had to pay a top.
Well, I'm not sure who those are because they've gotten letters from me. Every one of our registered folks have gotten letters from me about the TOT with the new form and discussing what their what the changes are now that some of their online travel agents or their intermediaries are paying some TOT on their behalf. So there was a big shift in where we get our money. So everybody that receives a permit and runs an Airbnb, first of all, when they register their Airbnb, they have to acknowledge what the transient occupancy tax percentage is.
That's.
So they know they have to submit a
When
local
they
tax.
apply for a permit, the top terms are clearly spelled out. Because what I was told, they said, we get a tax bill from the county, we get a tax bill from the town. They were waiting for a tax bill for top.
Yeah, but there's no way I can do that because we don't know what their sales are.
Isn't that based on, it's based on the occupancy? It's
5%,
occupancy
yeah, it's
tax.
5%.
Right, it's an occupancy tax, so if they have no occupancy, that's the other thing, though, if you have, even if you do not have occupancy during a certain period, you are required to send in a form that says
It
exactly
says
that.
zero, yes. We have some folks who do submit tot with zero revenue.
Right.
They're required to file their tot form every quarter, whether they have revenue or not.
That form is quarterly, that's-
Quarterly, yeah. Restaurants provide meals tax monthly. Tot is due quarterly.
And you follow up at that point if you don't receive a quarterly tot form.
Well, for Airbnbs, we only have a few that actually have done it over time. So now, since the new online travel agents remittance complication, yes, they're getting a love note from me if they don't submit their tot.
My question goes to, if you do not have occupancy and you do not send in the form, what are you basing a fine on? So should you not have a standard fee that attaches to that? So, because there's going to be times when people, yeah, I haven't anybody for the last 2 months, and I'm away, blah, blah. But I know with your sales tax, even to the state, you have to submit the form and say zero.
Yes, you do. And that's our code as well.
And we
as
get
far as
fined if we do not.
Yes, you do, and as does everybody. So we can look at the transient occupancy code next, if you'd like, to make sure that there are those that we call out a specific penalty if there's zero, $25 or whatever it is. So a failure to file.
Failure to file,
Yeah.
because that's how you keep track.
And can we ask about penalties, if they don't pay any tot, can we rescind their permit?
That's what this calls out for, is if they don't submit, if they're idle for 12 months,
Well,
that
that's
means
a
they're
different-
not operating, or
That's
they
different.
don't submit their tot as defined.
Oh,
That's in the second line.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
No, that's no problem.
Well,
There's a
as
lot of
a
changes
farmer,
in
this.
You just can't do that automatically, though. There's gotta be a 3-time failure or something. You can't just say, oh, you skipped a month, you're out. We want it out anyway.
What does tot, what does define mean?
Yeah, what is as defined? We haven't defined it.
Well, it is defined. There's a whole section,
But how long?
chapter 16,
says
article
for-
4
for
is,
Yeah, but where is
No,
chapter
that's if you
16
don't, that's if you're
article?
right.
it's in the
Right.
code. I
Or
don't have it
does
with
not
me.
submit.
This wasn't an ordinance that
Well,
discussed
so if
tot.
you don't do it for 2, there should be a penalty. And you can't just pull somebody's permit because they didn't file for 2 months, but you can get $50 for it.
Well, but if
No,
it,
but Memphis, it's not saying anything about 2 months. It says if you go a year without doing anything.
The question was about if you don't file this month, do you get a fine? Yes. If you don't file next month, do you get a fine? If you do not file for 12 months, you can have your permit rescinded. You cannot have your permit rescinded for those 2 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, and what my recommendation would be is, because it does say, or does not submit tot as defined. So the tot code is not in here because this isn't an ordinance that addresses tot. So I mean, we can look at that later to see if there's a penalty for non-filing that you want to add. And I think that'd be perfectly fine. We update that code every year when we set the budget, if there's a change to the tot percentage. There hasn't been for a little bit, so.
I think
So,
we need to look at
As
that code.
defined.
Yeah. we need
Yeah,
to
that's
look at
fine.
that
I've got
code.
that. We can put
so
that on the agenda.
we're of the opinion they should be some penalty for not paying the top, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Or submitting
Or
the
submitting,
zero.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, so I'll put a tot ordinance review on the calendar.
My question was a little bit different in that section,
Go ahead.
which is that we're saying that for new Airbnbs approved under these upcoming regulations, this will be one of the things that would get you revoked.
Yes.
Does this idle permit / non-submission also get one of the existing prior rules Airbnbs revoked?
Not under this section, no, because they're grandfathered in, and I did a lot of research for grandfathering when we did this, because we were all a little concerned that administering this is going to be an absolute nightmare because we would have to know when
Two-
the
two
original
completely
permit
different
was put
sets of
in.
rules.
Yeah, exactly. So on our tot, what we're doing is we're putting a form of a column in there that shows the date that their permit was. If I don't have it, then it'll be just obtained prior to whenever you folks adopted this. And then it would be any application subsequent to that would be under these rules. And we're gonna have to keep this version handy, so if they get grandfathered in and
The
the
next-
policy changes again, so administering these codes is, we wanna make sure we don't set up the office for failure. I think I answered your question, that yes, we're gonna have to keep track of which permits are under which ordinance in order to police it. My understanding is that a special use permit for this purpose cannot be rescinded without cause. So they're grandfathered in under the old way permanently. Now, I would believe that the tot, that's the
Fall
part where,
under the four
Yes.
clause, and that's kind of what I was trying to get
and I
at.
would believe that they would be required to honor the current tot because that's their current tax obligation. So if we did put something in for a penalty for non-filing, that would apply to all permit holders or all taxpayers, I guess it would be, not just.
Well, you sort of have a penalty already, because you're saying if you do not submit your top, your special use permit is rescinded.
Not for 12 months,
For 12 months.
not for 12 months.
And,
Yeah, it is. Oh, yeah, you're right.
That's a big,
but
that's the
that's
big deal.
only for the people who have yet to go under these rules, because these rules aren't enforced yet. What I was trying to get at was the distinction between the existing ones and then what this would be.
Yeah, if the question I think you're asking is if there's an existing permit in place and they don't file their tot, what do
Yes.
we do?
Yes.
And what I'm suggesting is let's, in the tot ordinance review, let's address that. And I don't believe that their permit is grandfathered, not their tax responsibility.
Right, not the application of rules that come.
Correct. Yeah, we will get our tot. All right, so I think that got us through paragraph B. Paragraph C, it says basically the current owner, or if the property sale is contingent on securing a special use permit, the current owner and the purchaser may jointly apply.
So in that case, no, I remember, but the may jointly apply, does that mean that essentially that the current person may support the new person or the new person may apply solo? Is that what that?
Yeah, my understanding of the confusion with that was that it needed to be a property owner in town to apply. If the current owner doesn't support the subsequent owner's application, then I don't imagine that they're going to jointly apply for anything. And then when they close, if they choose to close, then they're going to have to submit the application solo. That's the way I interpret
The
that.
sale may not take place.
Correct.
So this allows, that gives you flexibilities to allow the sale to take place if both parties
If it's
are.
contingent, if both parties are in agreement, yes.
Okay, then. May I suggest a wording change?
Sure.
After the comma, after special use permit, to say explicitly, the current owner may support the application of a prospective purchaser.
Well, it says, but both the current owner and the purchaser may jointly apply.
Same thing.
And it's the same thing.
It is the same thing.
It does, to me, it doesn't say.
Well, we can make we can make the adjustments to whatever you want, and then council's gonna take a motion, and if somebody wants to alter it during discussion, they can do it that way, but I'm happy to make it as clear in any way that you want. I'm not hung up on the verbiage, I'm more hung up on the intent.
But if the current owner is applying for a special use permit, what name is he applying for it in?
It says the current owner has to apply, or if it's contingent on sale, both the current owner and the purchaser may apply.
It says may apply.
Right.
Yeah, the key word there is may.
But the purchaser's got to apply because the permit's gonna be in his name.
And so that's why I was
So
saying
you
that,
could say must jointly apply?
Yeah,
That's fine.
yeah, that's kind of,
but the,
why would you give another, the current owner already has a permit. Why is he gonna apply for another one? The permit's-
Yeah, but then why would you require him to support it? I don't.
Yeah, well, the idea was that, like Matt said, they couldn't apply because they didn't own the property. So
Yeah,
we should say, that all we need to say is that somebody that's applying can apply for the permit, even if they don't own the property. That's what we're trying to say. We don't have to have it.
Yeah, you could narrow it down to that,
We
but I
don't have
don't
to, we don't have to link it to the current owner to apply. Why should he apply? And that's my opinion.
because the current owner may not support it.
Well, why would he wouldn't sell if he was supported?
But
Well,
he's only
what
supporting
you're
it for
gonna
the
use
sale of
your
the
house
property.
for after, I mean, what you're gonna use the house for after I sell it to you, is
Yeah.
not necessarily my business.
Correct.
What this would say, I think the purpose of this was if it was a continuing operation. If I'm operating an Airbnb and I'm selling it to somebody who's gonna operate as an Airbnb, but that person's not gonna buy it without this permit in hand,
Right.
they could both come forward to council and jointly make the application.
But you're saying may, it still says the owner shall apply. Why would the owner apply? He's already got a permit.
What it says is that there has to be a current owner on the application.
So if the sale doesn't go through, the
Yeah,
owner is
I
on
mean,
the.
you're
is on
assuming
the
the sale's
books.
already gone through.
Right,
Yeah, and we were trying to get around that, yeah.
but
Current
is,
owner or prospective.
this contingency thing is just about the same thing with the bed and breakfast being transferred or sold. And it's a contingency. If I can't get a special use permit in that neighborhood, then my B and B is closed.
Well,
That's a sale.
that's a sale. The problem is that somebody can't technically apply if they don't own the property.
it's a catch
Right,
22.
It's a catch
right, but I
22, so we're
get
trying
this.
to let them apply. We understand it's contingent, but we just want, we should just say prospective, what can you just say, prospective owner can apply?
That's what it says.
The
in the
prospective,
sentence.
yeah, the second.
And
The only
that's-
issue that
that
I've
was
got
just
is if
The
it's a,
purchaser.
if
is
it's
a-
somebody that comes in and they are thinking about buying that house.
Right.
And they come to you with a permit without a closing date, without anything else, and they say, I'm gonna buy this house if I get this permit. The current owner is like, I don't even know who this person is.
Oh, okay, well, oh, I see.
So I think it's gotta be a joint
Oh, I see what you mean.
application.
In case that, let's assume they don't own one to start with.
That's exactly.
Right,
the point.
okay, right, all right. Okay, I
What
was
if they
thinking-
just offer a letter of support? Do they have to jointly apply?
Well, I mean, this is actually less effort
Okay,
to put your
yeah.
name on the bottom of the application than it would be to write a letter
I
of
was
support.
assuming that
I think it does the
first
same
owner
thing.
Owner already had an Airbnb. That's, yeah, it could be non-Airbnb. Okay, I see
Right.
what you're saying now, yeah. Okay.
So do you want to change it to must? The wordage, the,
I
no?
think may is just
Same works.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
not shall. not
Okay.
must.
got it. All right. Next paragraph, there is a contingency, there's a stipulation in the code that says only one, you can only own one homestay in town. Somebody on commission had asked, what about LLCs and the members of the LLCs? So basically, the concept here is that no individual may own any portion of more than one homestay in town. So any purchaser of a property or any permit holder for an Airbnb has to disclose all members of the LLC or corporation, and no member of that purchasing group can be even a partial owner of another.
Can I ask what the thinking was in that respect?
I think the thinking was that we don't want partners, we had said we don't want businesses coming in and buying up properties and opening
Are you
Airbnbs
talking the
around
first
town.
one, second sentence?
And LLCs are a sort of a shielded way to purchase a property. So if I went in and bought House A under a Nancock LLC and then bought House B under Accomack County LLC, you don't know who the owner is, and therefore I can own both by just submitting a separate LLC for both, which I'm going to do for tax and liability purposes anyway. So what this is saying,
Is the disclosure would be there, but they not permitting the the sale or the establishment of more than one business. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It does to me.
It's just a stop.
Well, you're not gonna have, okay, just a question for my clarification.
No, that's
Thank you.
fine. Did I answer your question? I mean, whether you agree or disagree, did I answer your question?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's awfully hot in here.
Yes.
I turned it down a couple
Thank you.
degrees already.
I'm melting fate.
More. Remember, we're up here. You're down there. It's hot.
Lord of mercy.
All right.
And I offered to open the door, but I'm cozy.
Yeah,
But you're down there.
All right. So that's the disclosure on the members of an LLC or corporation. All right, this is the part where it says you have to have a local contact for property management. That part's not a big change. The change is that this contact information for the local contact will be provided to all adjoining neighbor and property owners and the Hancock Police
And I
Department.
think you're opening yourself up to big old mess with that. I think that is just absolutely unnecessary because the ownership and the contact person is in the hands of the police and in the town. And I don't think all four neighbors need to be able to get on the phone and and tell you what's going on. That's not the purpose of having somebody as the designated on site.
Yeah, the reason that we put that in there was because later we talk about that the special use permit can be rescinded with 3 substantiated complaints.
Call the police or call
Well,
the
but
town
that
and
was the
complain.
mechanism for managing those complaints was, I think I used an example, if I'm the neighbor and they've got the music too loud and I walk over there and say, hey, the music's too loud, do you mind turning it down? And they turn it down. Is that a substantiated complaint? Can I lose my permit because you went over there, talked to the people, they turned it down? And that was we're trying to figure out, because if the neighbor doesn't want that Airbnb and it gets passed through, we want to make sure we've got a mechanism in place that's not just going to be retaliatory.
Well, this is retaliatory. If you have people and four neighbors, call them up and complain. You know, that's not right. If you have the mechanism in place to monitor and to stop a problem, that's what you need. And that's what that person who's 24/7 is what you require, availability. That's what that person is for. I don't think my personal phone or cell phone or my address should be all over the place, all over the neighborhood, if I don't want it to be.
Find other towns or cities that made neighbors information available when we were discussing.
Not
this.
in my research. I think this came out of several public comments and comments around the planning commission table, that folks felt that if there was an Airbnb in their immediate vicinity, they wanted to know who the contact person was if there was a problem.
That's
So they
fine.
would call the contact person.
That's fair.
That's what this says.
No, it says the owners adjoining property, the contact information will be made available to the property adjoining. You're only talking about the contact person and not the owners.
That's correct. Yeah, it's the property manager. So
Okay, I didn't get that. out of
Okay.
that.
The owner referred there is the neighbor owners, not the,
Okay, I
owners
did
of
not,
Airbnb.
right, I did not get that out of what I was reading there.
here again, if there's any clarity that we can add to this, I'd love to get it, I'd love to get it right. So, and this, because it's for discussion purposes only, I mean, take it home and take a,
yeah.
I guess a blue pen, because everything else is red and black, but
So for times when the calls from the town police are rolling over to the sheriff's office, does that mean that the sheriff would then by default get that information too?
again, that's such a great question. I don't have the ability to require the sheriff to report back. The mutual aid agreement doesn't go that direction. So if we get a complaint that goes to the sheriff. Typically, the sheriff would, our police department would know if the sheriff was called.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm wondering is if a call comes to the town, rolls to the sheriff, then how's the sheriff gonna know who to contact?
Oh, so what you're saying is, should the sheriff also be given the contact information for the Airbnb?
Yeah, or is that automatically in the handoff that the
And that I can tell you
the
it's
town
not,
police
but
give?
what we could do is, let me put a note in there for Chief and find out how he would like to see that, because it's a great question.
I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but
Yeah.
it seems like you've got a black hole there for those times.
Well, that happens all the time, because if the call goes into our police department, it doesn't go to one of our officers directly.
Right, but the question is, how do I lodge the substantiated complaint?
Right,
So I
right.
wouldn't know if the sheriff responded to a call, I wouldn't know that it's for an Airbnb substantiated complaint.
Right, but that was the other side of that, but I'm just saying, how, does the call ever go to the Onancock Police Department that they respond?
So they get the 911, if they forward. to them.
911, but not a regular call.
I mean, a
I don't know
regular
what a
call.
regular
Like,
call means.
well, just call up, there's a cat running loose, or, but
Call
you know,
Hulu.
you know what I'm saying? Those things, those
Well, we have the
calls,
local number.
yeah. And who enters it? An entering machine.
Yes, at times that's true.
Well, enforcement of this thing.
What
is-
percent
Yeah, that's
of
a-
the time?
I can't have
That'd be a
it.
problem anyway.
All right.
And you can write a lot of stuff down. Where it's enforcement, it's all great.
The next one is where some of the real restrictions come in. So this one reads that there must be a minimum of 200 linear feet. And we couldn't decide where to start measuring. So basically it's from the water meter or the front center of the property, depending on the water meter, where the water meter is located. And one tax parcel. So it's 200 feet plus a tax parcel between any two Airbnbs.
I'm involved on this. I don't understand this.
So if I have an Airbnb at my house, the next closest one that will be allowed is 200 feet away plus that next parcel. So there's gonna always, the reason they did the next parcel is because some people have parcels bigger than 200 feet. And we don't want neighbors. We don't want contiguous Airbnbs. We want enough space between them, and we want to make sure there's no neighbors. So people who have large parcels without that extra parcel in between, it could be a neighbor. So the point of this is that we do not want contiguous Airbnbs, and we want them to be far enough apart.
Why don't you just say we don't want contiguous Airbnbs?
Because then you could go every other house, and for smaller parcels, that could be,
Close.
60 feet apart.
So what's the deal with the water meter? Why not, my water meter's on the edge of my property? Why don't you
Yeah,
just have
I,
the center of the line?
we were looking, and I really do believe that part of it should come out and be something we manage administratively between whether it's the center of the parcel, the center front line. I mean, that's the part where we were really getting into the
Yeah,
weeds.
I mean,
This is nutsy. This
Yeah, that's
sounds nutsy.
It was quite a conversation.
yeah, I think
So
Multiple meetings.
yeah, the premise is we want 200 feet plus a lot before you get, and that way we have no neighbors and they're at least 200 and something feet apart.
This was the best way we could figure out how to manage the clustering that some residents seem to be concerned about.
I have no problem with trying to do that. It's just the
I mean, you look at the
details
lots
there.
in Mount Prospect, and they're
Yeah.
larger lots versus Pine Street or pick another part of town where you got small lots. So if you use a distance of feet, then in any situation, you eliminate the clustering.
The question is where to measure from. though.
Yeah, well, and I agree. I think
Where?
Let me do that administratively. I mean, I don't think anybody is
We
gonna,
gotta have something in the code, though, right?
well, I think that saying something in the code measured from this property center line on the street frontage is fine.
Yeah,
I can take a water meter out of that.
easier to actually measure it from the corner of pin.
Well, that's
And not
assuming I can find
contiguous,
a
is
pin.
it?
Like, get close enough.
And plus you have to, there's other people who have double lots.
Yeah.
You know, and we're trying to get all of these things accommodated for, because the double lot's not gonna have a separate water meter, so I can't go water meter to water meter. It might be on the other lot. It's just, trust me when I tell you, 200 feet plus a parcel is as good as we could get to get the density down, because if you take the town map and you do 200 feet, you know, circles, we're not that big. So we're gonna have very few. And inside that lap,
So yeah, so you're talking about that being like the radius point.
Right.
And so you could be like at, my house on King Street and 200 feet, you can stretch out to Market Street, for
Yes.
example.
yeah,
So you're excluding all those areas too.
yeah.
That's,
Yeah, you need
yeah,
to
I
sit,
mean, you maybe need to explain that in this.
well, you need to sit down with the map and draw circles.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done it with a
This
few
is-
people.
This
The
is
map,
big. This
yeah,
is-
it is. This one is very restrictive. I've got a.
If your lots are large, it's.
But then you're going a
But
whole
if your
nother
lots
lot.
are
right?
small,
That's-
it's not. If your lots are small, it's really not. And, you know, you said the lots are large in Mount
No, if
Prospect.
you have, if your
Some
lot
of
is
them
small,
are.
it's a lot.
Some of them
It's
are.
very restrictive.
Yeah, it's more restricted to
It's
small.
more
around.
restrictive if your lot is small,
Because you go over a lot of
because you're
lots.
restricting.
Still gotta go 200 feet. You're
Then you
gonna
gotta
Like
go
over
over
four
four
lots,
lots, then
yeah.
you're skipping a whole nother lot. So that's a lot of crazy,
Yeah,
Yeah.
surveying to be done.
yeah.
Who's gonna be doing this?
They're looking at them.
The other part of this is not
I'm
contiguous.
gonna get a piece of string 200 feet long. I'm gonna tack it in and I'm gonna start walking in a circle. Now, this part of it is, it's hard to come up with a way to restrict the number in town. We had talked about saying, look, we're only gonna issue 15 permits. But then if all 15 permits are sitting down on, you know, in the historic district, that's a problem. So then we said, okay, we don't want any contiguous, but we don't want them to be clustered, and we want them to be far apart. We don't want to restrict by neighborhood. We don't want to discriminate by, just because everybody wants to be down in the historic district where the Airbnb would probably be most successful. We don't want them clustered there, but we don't want to say, oh, you can have them all up, you know, cursed with. This was a way to try to level the playing field among the whole town, account for larger lots, smaller lots, no clustering, no neighbors. This is as good as we could come up with.
I think it needs to go back to the drawing board because it's nutsy.
Well, but what's you're the drawing board at this point.
And I have a suggestion. The purpose of this originally was to preserve our neighborhoods. Would you agree, all of you? That we didn't want our neighborhoods taken over by Airbnbs.
That was the
So,
purpose of some in the conversation, certainly not all,
Thank you.
what was the other purpose then?
to come up with a solution that tightened up the existing ordinance and took into account other people's feelings. I mean, Mathis and I have been adamantly proponents of Airbnbs. I
Oh,
don't
I am
think
too.
there's a problem.
I have no problem with Airbnbs in town, but I don't want them taking over the town, and I think you agree, both of you, right? No? Okay, so we can agree to disagree.
Well,
No,
I might
I'm-
phrase it
I'm gonna take
differently,
away-
but I don't disagree.
That's a very broad question.
My suggestions, since we are, some of us are concerned about our neighborhoods, that we let our neighbors decide if they want an Airbnb. We let our neighbors know. If an Airbnb, if a person applies for an Airbnb at a specific house, let the neighbors vote if they want an Airbnb there.
There's some real difficulties with that. First, others have referenced the Virginia Beach ordinance, which subsequently got overturned to allow neighbors to vote for approval. So that is off the table now. But then how would you structure that? So what happens if somebody gets declined and, you know, I've heard people talk about 75% of neighbors.
Right.
So define neighbors for me, define what happens with the process when one house sells in that proximity. I mean, you run into the same conundrum of, you know, how do you build something that can be managed in that situation?
Well, you have the same
And
situation
this
when
takes
this house
personality.
sells.
out of it. I mean, you still have a public hearing, and people still get to voice support or lack of support.
But
It takes personality and backbiting and, you know, the opportunity for
do we have,
not fair play out of the equation.
And fair
do
play should be-
neighbors
fair
have
play
any
has to be in
voice
it.
once we put this into
Of
code?
course, it's just a
Or
special
public
use permit.
hearing.
Well,
That's a
yeah,
special use
but
permit
neighbors
still.
came in
That's
and
a good
voiced
question,
their,
because, like, do we follow this policy? So if, application comes in and meets the
Right.
requirements, but the, neighbors do not want it,
You still gonna.
are we still, but why? Why would we?
Because that's the special use permit. This is the requirements for even applying for special use permit. You still have to apply for special use permit. Special use permits that's the whole
Okay.
point of it.
But
Yeah,
As a-
these are
as
the
a
minimum
council member,
requirements to
but
even
the
get it.
application, but the applicant has met the requirement
He's-
needs.
But he's not, but it's still up for
It's
you all.
still
to make
at the
decisions.
discretion. of
Otherwise,
the
it would not
council.
be a special use
Do you
permit.
remember the one that we turned down 6, 7 months ago?
Yeah.
To do due
Okay, so that
diligence.
one, that's a prime example where the neighbors had substantive reasons why they were not in favor of it. And even though it didn't meet the requirements of the existing ordinance, we chose not to grant that permit. So we still have the same opportunity under this.
We granted that. permit.
No, we
No,
didn't.
that was
Oh, I
7.
thought you were talking about on the market.
but on the other hand, we were faced with two,
And we granted both of those.
and we granted both of those when the neighbors
Right.
said no.
Right.
So we're inconsistent.
The whole application process in those cases, those people went through the whole process and did all their work based on what the current ordinance was. Now we've got this new thing, this new attitude, we're afraid of 99 million homestays. Well, this is why you're building this monster.
But Mavis, still,
Those people did the process according to what we had on the books.
And but
And
the
they
point
have-
is the special use permit was supposed to be open up to the neighbors, and the neighbors opposed it, we still granted it. So the
Exactly.
system didn't work in that
Exactly.
situation, according to the people that lived around it.
But
So they're looking for
that's not
recourse.
in the ordinance, though.
Right,
They
But
don't
that
have
doesn't,
to.
it makes no difference.
It doesn't have
The
to.
ordinance is the
Now
same.
it is.
hold on.
It still can be turned down even if they meet these requirements. You have to understand that.
Right, I
And you
do
can't-
understand
I
that.
don't think you do. because
Oh,
you don't-
yes, I do.
Okay.
If they meet these
You
requirements.
don't have to grant it. You can
The
still turn it
council
down.
still has discretion.
Right. If you still have 20 people come in and say, I don't want it there, even if it meets these
I
requirements.
understand that. I
Okay.
just felt it was an unfair situation, and I'm tired of defending this because I felt it was an unfair situation to have those people come to the brink and then tell them no, based on attitude and no other reason.
Attitude, well, people live next door, they don't, what kind of attitude is that? The people can't have a say. in
I-
it.
They can absolutely have their say and no one stopped them.
Well, the point is that everybody needs to be clear that even if they meet these requirements, it's still a special use permit. If we want to remove the special use permit and do it by right, if they meet these requirements, that's another, you can do that. But we haven't done that. It's still a special
If
use.
you incorporate in this that it has to be neighbor approved, then it will be.
Right. Well, I agree a little bit with Bob about what his statements about neighbor approved is that I think the
It can't be, right? By the test was in Virginia Beach, that it can't be.
Well,
based
that's
on-
one for you.
Well, they just chose to
That was a
remove that
test.
because of the difficulty in
Right, yeah.
defining the process.
Right, but I think council should make the decision and not pit neighbor against neighbor voting. And then, this should be our decision, or, if they meet the thing, it should be the council, we should be the bad guys if we're gonna turn somebody down instead of all the neighbors.
Or the bad guys and approve it.
Either way, yeah, but
Right.
it's our decision. I don't think we should
Right.
kick it down to people, if the neighbors if the neighbors don't like it, they can show up and complain at the meeting, and then we should listen to that. That's my opinion.
But
Yeah.
we do listen to them,
Yeah, I think that.
but we don't, then we vote the other way.
I understand
We
that, but
don't take that into
I think
consideration.
there's-
Excuse me, what was the vote? This is getting carried away anyway. We're going into something that's
well, I
done.
think we need to
But,
think about this.
but what was the vote on that? It was a vote. It was a majority vote that
Of course.
allowed that to happen.
Sure.
5-1.
Okay, okay.
4-1,
So
21 years.
don't tell me, don't sit here and tell me that you don't listen to people or you do listen to people. We voted.
Wait, yeah,
That's what we do.
well, I didn't say you didn't listen to them. You listened to them. You didn't vote the way they wanted you to. Okay, no, I didn't say you didn't listen to them. No, okay. Well, anyway, let's move on.
I have one other item in that.
Let's
In
get
the last full line, the word creates should be create, because the subject of those sentences, separations plural.
Where are you?
Thank you.
At the last.
Does
line,
automatically
it's a
create an
section F.
appropriate barrier.
Okay, thank you.
The creek is
Oh,
subsidiary, the subject is separations.
Thank you. The next line item is another way to,
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Go on to the next
Yeah.
line item.
that's fine.
I think I could feel better about this if you could possibly somehow show me. I'm not asking you to do the entire town on a map,
Mhm.
but if you could maybe like just do this neighborhood. This is, I mean, we all agree this is where everyone's
Mhm.
coming. If you could just show me,
Could you do it on that?
I
yeah,
have a map in my office.
I
that
know, but
has it.
everybody's in.
I know, the issue is I don't have a scale appropriate for that, but I have a map in my office and this isn't coming to vote tonight.
no, and
So,
that's what I'm saying, not
yeah,
now.
I have
but-
a piece of string and a tack in my office and I can show you because all the parcels are right there. And I can show you the impact that this would be.
Good, that would be good. That would
Yeah,
be very good.
I would suggest that you go in and have a conversation or pull a map out yourself and look
Or
at it.
just emails, X
you don't have to
amount.
email,
I
you don't
I
have to
can't
sit down with
email
a
this on
map.
the wall, so.
Yeah,
Oh, you can do it on that email.
You can try Google Maps, it's got a scale on there.
Yeah, you can
You
draw
you can choose like a 200-foot circle.
Okay, so I would go 200 linear feet
Yeah,
plus a parcel.
yeah.
Plus the parcel.
Okay.
That, you can choose your radius is 200 feet, and then you can then jump to another parcel.
No, this
and
is
see the
technically
scale.
complicated.
What if that house is not an Airbnb? Then you just like,
I don't know what you're saying, that. house. I
well,
don't know
okay,
which
you
house
go
is that
200
one.
feet plus a parcel.
Yeah.
And that house is not an Airbnb, so where's the next Airbnb?
That's the first place that it could be one.
Okay.
If I have an Airbnb here and I go 200 feet plus a parcel, that's the next parcel is the next closest one, as long as it's not in somebody else's contiguous circle
on
You
the other
know.
side.
on the other side. So that's what I'm saying, is that this limits the congestion of them for sure. That was the purpose of it, because we didn't want them clustered.
I guess
How
my
many
question
do
would be
you
like, yeah,
predict
how many could you possibly
Yeah,
have in this
in
area?
town? Yeah,
That's a calculation that could be made. It's
Yeah.
very time consuming.
I've
10.
done it. It's
we
in
have
the-
11 now.
Yeah, well, they're fewer than that because of the sale, but with the positioning of them, the reason is that, if there's one, I'm gonna pick the Flint. We've already issued them a permit. They're just doing the renovation. They're
Who is
over at
this?
37 King, okay? If I take a 200-foot radius around that eliminates all the way up to Parker and the first two houses on Parker. So, and it eliminates everybody on King all the way down to where number 6 is, because number 6 goes 200 feet this way. So there will be no more on King Street, let me put it that way, because of the 200 feet between those two. Now, if you take so you can go by the existing Airbnbs here, plop a pin in it, you can sit there and see where the remaining few will be allowed,
Well, that'd be
but
an-
it will be a remaining few.
well, that would be an interesting thing to draw a 200 circle around every single existing and figure out how many more you
Yes.
can, that would be a useful exercise to do. Can you do that? A map, you just draw 200, print out a map and have a 200-foot circle.
I will come up with a way to do this.
Yes, yeah, I think that would be
Or
beneficial.
if you could just give us a list of what the existing.
Yeah, either that.
Because I know some of them, but I don't know them all.
And
Well,
I can give you the list, no problem. I've got it right in front of me, but the 200
coming
foot.
up 200 feet radius. And
Yeah,
then
all right, I will come up with a way to do this
Jumping a
and
lot.
show you.
I've got a big map big map of the sewer system that's got all the town plots, I can do it on that.
I've got a really cool map at
Yeah.
my wall that shows every parcel and all that.
Right,
It'll
yeah.
work just fine. I
I mean,
just
this
need
is
to
pretty
figure out how to.
This seems to be one of the major sticking points of this thing, where
Yeah.
if this isn't gonna work, then we need to
Yeah.
move on, yeah, all right.
So
Well, but the
basically,
intent, but you agree with
purpose-
the intent of it is
no,
not
I
the
don't know
cluster.
the intent. That's
You
what
live
I'm
in the
asking.
suburbs,
I'm
Is it
asking-
to limit the number of Airbnbs
In any one area.
or
In-
per town?
No, in any one area.
Well, it's gonna limit in town. as
Yeah,
well.
it will, because the town's got boundaries too, so,
Yeah.
but it's, the
To limit
purpose
both.
of it is to not allow them to be clustered in any one neighborhood. That's the purpose, and this achieves that purpose. Does it do it with grace and dignity? No, but it does it. And as far as, if there were, 15 of these in town, running out with a 200-foot piece of laundry rope once a year isn't going to be that onerous because we're not going to get that many applications, especially when we start doing the next line.
Based
Um,
on this.
yeah.
We're not gonna get any more.
Well, so the next line says that because we don't want these to be primarily business operations, the next line limits the number of days that you can operate or rent as an Airbnb to 90 days. Now, this was an arbitrary number. The way that I came up with this number was I took the cost of a mortgage and property taxes, advertising, insurances, and things like that. And I divided it out and said, okay, our average daily rate for a lot of our Airbnbs is X. I divided it up and said, okay, their break even is 90 days, give or take. So if you want somebody to allow for them to operate an Airbnb, but you don't want it to be a business operation, this would allow them to cover the costs generally of operating that home. The assumption is that folks buy these houses and until they can retire and move here, they want to run them as an Airbnb, but they don't want to get hurt financially. This might allow that to happen. That's the intent.
The intent
Yes.
is not your business. Because if somebody buys a property and decides what they want to do with it, and they have followed all the rules and regulations to do that, how many days they operate their business is not your business and not your business. So their free enterprise system will be dead quickly with this. And I think you're asking for trouble. 90 days, who cares whether or knows what their break even is going to be or why?
I agree with you, but this was something that came out of public comment and out of some of the planning.
90 days?
This is really the only thing in here that I strongly disagree with, and
I
you
do
know, I
too.
will admit to be a capitalist at heart.
Yes.
And I really draw no distinction between somebody who wants to run an Airbnb and somebody who wants to buy a home in town and rent it out long-term and not live there. I think the two are pretty much the same thing. You are in business whether you're renting on a 12-month lease or whether you're renting night to night. I don't like this, but this was the consensus of the planning commission, so I said I would support it.
Well, would
And
you?
I will say it was not an overwhelming consensus. This point was the one where they said this is where council could have the effect of like, look, if somebody's going to get this permit, why don't you let them make some money?
Well, I think it
What's
was,
the, you know, what's
they
the,
were just kicking it up to us. I think they were asking us for the number.
I can see double.
I don't think you need.
Yeah,
more.
that was the,
Yeah.
120
I
was
just
thrown
say
out there.
strike the whole thing. and
One
Let's
twenty,
try to
one
decide what they want to rent.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of
That's
people
not
come
your
for
business.
Thanksgiving, a lot of people come for Christmas.
Well,
You're not.
120 days is
I
a
think
lot of
just
days.
let them
yeah.
strike it.
I doubt we have any
entirely.
big Airbnbs doing 120 days. do we?
you have some that were kind of close to that, but those would be our two most successful. They would be creeping
I don't
in
think-
on. 120 is that's a third of the year.
Yeah.
They're spending money to advertise, to promote, and they're doing this is their business. This is their property. And we should not be meddling in how many days they're gonna operate. You want to tell me when my business should be open and closed?
I've had
But we're talking
Airbnb.
about in a residential neighborhood.
Live in a residential
But they're not
neighborhood,
coming in at all
365
But
days.
they're not coming in and, don't know, coming in and out all the time. It's like there's somebody live there, you know your neighbor, you get to know them. You got a different person every weekend. That's the whole point. I mean, that's the, yeah. And I'm not gonna follow my sword on this number. I think, I don't think that, I think the one above it is much more critical, but,
The Airbnb owners in town said they will shut it down if we put this one in.
Well, they're
And
not.
that may be the purpose of it. is
Well,
to
no,
shut 'em
they-
down.
no, they're
But you
grandfathered.
don't understand, they're grandfathered.
Those are grandfathered.
Right.
But
So new applications.
Right, yeah, would not apply.
Right.
let me ask, was the paragraph above unanimous?
The distance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. I think we all
Sometime
agreed
around
that,
200
we all
feet.
agreed that that was based on the site, and I did do the map and showed a couple of parcels and said, okay, if we have one here in Prospect, this is what it would look like. So this isn't gonna be a huge lift,
We're
but
looking forward to
This
public
was-
discussion.
this would F keeps them from being clustered. G keeps them from being profitable.
Thank you from being profitable, so that, yeah, let's shut it down. Okay, but the thing too is that if you start limiting what one person who takes the effort to promote their business or promote the town to get people to come and stay, then you might as well just not allow them the permit to begin with.
Who is recording the days that are rented?
On their tot, the new form requires to have the number of room nights that they.
That's up to the owner.
Yeah, but there's the calculation's pretty simple to be able to figure out whether the number's accurate. You know, because I'll jump in with one complication. The new way that tot is paid is if the online agent, Airbnb, VRBO, if they collect the money for the rental, they remit the tot now. So I'll know that certain properties were rented because I'll get a check from Homestay. So there is some, that's the simplest and probably the kindest way I can talk about that process, because it's not auditable, it's ugly, but I will get some money. So I'll be able to tell what their average daily room rate is. So if they rent it for 200 a night and they submit their tot and it's only for $94 a night, I'll know that that's been miscalculated. All right, okay. Page 2, only 14 pages more to go, folks.
So
That's a joke, it's a joke.
before you go.
Yeah.
Are we leaving in E or G as it stands, or just, are we taking it out of here? And my recommendation is that we take it out entirely, and that is this going back to planning commission, or is this
It
coming
is
back?
not, this is you.
Okay, this is coming to council for vote later on. This to me, and I don't know if anybody else is feeling this way, this should be just eliminated. The 90 days.
Well, we're having public comment.
Not tonight.
That's fine.
And you said in January.
We're gonna have a public hearing. We need to advertise an ordinance.
Right, but that's what I would like to do, is get an ordinance that you would be comfortable
But
voting
if we
in.
advertise an ordinance to make it less restrictive, we don't have to have another public hearing. Is that correct? If we advertise it as this and then decided at the public hearing to take out the 90-day and strike it, do we have to have another public
That's
hearing?
No,
Yeah.
you're fine.
You're fine,
You're
We
fine.
can, if we make it less restrictive,
correct.
so we can change it after the, okay. That's just, that was just a legal.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
if a quorum of council tonight says strike it.
Yes, yeah, I got
It
you.
shall be stricken,
Right, yeah.
you know.
Is there a quorum saying strike it?
I say strike it.
I say strike it.
I said strike it.
There's 4.
That's a court.
There it is. Okay, there you go. Okay. This next one was a little complicated as well. We're looking to try to find out how many people can be inside of any one of these houses. So now we've restricted to where they can be, no longer how many nights they can be there, but now it was that we want to make sure that they don't, I guess it's, the purpose is not to turn into party houses. If we want families coming to town, then we want to be able to manage the number of people that are inside of an Airbnb. So the only way I could come up with doing this was by saying that no more than two guests per bedroom and no more than 4 persons for each full bathroom, except for nuclear families who have more children than that, and they don't need to worry about it. And the property must provide off-street parking for 1 vehicle for every 4 guests. So those 2 things is we wanted to make sure that we governed the size of the number of guests. So this would preclude anything from becoming overwhelming and busy and party houses. But if somebody comes and they have 5 children, this also just allows for that. You know, if y'all want to sleep in sleeping bags on the floor, this is fine. So that's what we tried to do here.
What's a nuclear family?
Nuclear family is mama, papa, children.
Or mama children.
Mama,
dad,
children,
children.
parent, children, thank you.
What about
Sorry
gardens?
about that. Yeah.
I got you.
Anybody have a problem with that?
All right.
I don't believe
So
you
you
can
can
police
have
it,
2
but.
guests
I know,
per
you're right,
bedroom.
I
But
don't
if they have
believe
sleeping bags,
Well,
you
that's
can
just
have
gonna tell
1.
the owner.
You can have
Right.
2, if they have more,
can't police babysit.
Only if they have
Bring
more
them sleeping
bathrooms. Well, only if they're children. So
So adults
I
cannot
think
be.
it's-
correct. No, you can't crash on the floor and you're sleeping.
They may choose to abandon the
Exactly.
kids while sleeping.
You have to understand, we're trying to address a lot of concerns that came before planning commission with one ordinance. So they were concerned about having them too dense, they were too profitable, too many nights, too many people, too many, I mean, I think we understand what we're trying to do. There's only so many ways we can do it.
But we're putting in an ordinance that we're not even gonna enforce.
Well, that's not true, because we,
We're gonna go check.
well, not only by complaint, we do it the same way we police any other ordinance. it's by-
So now there's a family with grandma, grandpa, and there's only one bathroom in the house and there's 2 children. Now you got too many people in the house.
Well, it
And you're
depends-
gonna knock on the door and say, you have to get out.
Only if grandma's getting jiggy and causing problems with the neighborhood, and one of the neighbors complains, then yes, it's my job to enforce the ordinance. But I don't imagine that that's the purpose, but if a fraternity showed up on King Street and threw 40 guys in there and were causing all
We
kinds of
already have
problems.
that, though.
Automatically,
We
but-
have that.
right.
We have the
No, we don't.
complaint.
Where? Yeah, but
What happened to the
No, but that-
complaint thing?
The original just says there'll be a patrol station.
But you cannot police, I mean, putting into ordinance things you cannot police and control is kind of nuts to me. And it seems to me that if you want to say, to be careful about it and you're saying not a party town, we're not a party town. Forget about it. You don't even have to worry about it.
Well, I think that's.
I'm trying to write an ordinance that was
But the point is,
addressing.
if somebody
all of
comes
the-
in for an application, they're gonna read
Right.
this, they're gonna have a consultation with him, he's gonna tell them what they're allowed, and what they can and can't do. They're gonna read okay, so that's basically, it's informative, and if we can, it's an attempt.
Right.
They know what's allowed, it's the same as the top tax, we tell them what they're supposed to pay, a lot of them don't pay it, it's the same with personal property tax, some people choose not to pay it, and it's on the books, you want to take it off because we can't enforce it, I mean, come on. We're doing the best we can, and I think that they know with this, that he's gonna have the zoning administrator, gonna have a sit down, tell them what's allowed,
Okay.
and the policing it, you're right, is another story, but hopefully it's.
But it won't be a problem.
It's a step in the right direction.
I think it's good.
And it gives guidance,
It gives guidance to what
it
they can
gives
and can't do.
guidance to what they can
Exactly.
And if they
advertise.
intentionally violate it,
Right.
then we've got cause.
I think it's
But the
fine.
current language says that the zoning administrator is allowed to assess based on the bedrooms, how many guests are allowed per night. So why are we changing it to
Because we're giving
this?
them a little more guidance to go by, that's all.
to try to make it a little less subjective,
Right,
at
right,
least,
yeah.
to say, here are the criteria.
We want to take the subjectivity out.
Yeah.
The complaints are gonna have enough subjectivity.
All right, let's move on to the next
All
one.
right, next one's Griffin. This one's about insurance.
Yeah.
The owner is gonna provide proof of insurance, and then I got this from an actual insurance person at the time of the application, the liability coverage, no less than $1 million per occurrence and $2 million in aggregate. That's not onerous. It's standard business insurance. There's nothing that's
And the other thing
complicated.
is the same as before, right?
Yeah, it's just worded more specifically from an insurance advisor, so. Then it's pretty simple, no change. They're gonna comply with the applicable town laws. The town reserves the right to inspect the residences based on complaints. And then the last one says the special use permit will be revoked by the zoning administrator in the event that 3 or more substantiated complaints are received by the town in a calendar year, or failure to maintain in compliance with any of the regulations set forth. And that's the reason that I think that paragraph H is kind of important, because we can pull their permit if they fill the house with, a bad rental and they get too many, we can pull their permit then. We don't have to wait for 3 complaints.
Paragraph H,
That's the number of families and children and that type of thing, so.
because there's so many strike throughs, I wasn't sure which.
Yeah.
Iteration of H you were looking at.
All right. That is months worth of conversations with planning commission.
Well, I suggest that we look at, it seems like the sticking point is the 100-foot thing. I think we should look at that between now and the next meeting, and any other comments, and we'll come back at the next meeting with, people can sit down with a map, because we don't have time to do that tonight. And then everybody can and we're gonna we strike one thing out of, that was is gone, so then look at that next meeting, then we'll go out to public hearing in January. And is that okay with everybody? All right,
I do have a question. Why did you include the word substantiated with complaints?
Because one of the things that was happening was that people were saying, well, I complained about that, but nobody did anything about it. Or I went to the neighbors and complained. It has to be a complaint that comes to the town. You can't just say, I complained to the property manager 3 times and they should lose their permit. It's not substantiated by the town. That's the part where we're trying to get.
So does there need to be a definition
There
of what
to the others.
substantiation?
Yeah, I mean, that may
So
should.
I think that's the
Yeah, I mean,
administrative
I was
part of it
wondering
is
what
how
you were
we're
trying to
gonna,
say there.
how we're gonna make sure how to lodge a complaint is not ordinance, it's policy, so we'll get that
so
administrative.
if somebody makes a complaint, and you find out that it's bogus, then it's not a substantiated
That's
claim. Or not, or a vendetta.
I can see that could be, that's gonna be a lot of subjectivity.
And, well, it is, yeah.
You could have a neighbor complaining that there was a bad odor coming from the house.
Right.
Maybe no one else detected it.
Right, we have ordinances, on the.
Yeah, and that's where the police, that's why the police get the contact.
Subjectivity.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, so is everybody, so you need to, I guess the maps.
So December, map for the December meeting, January public hearing, and then vote at your discretion.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a lot, I've talked to several people who would like to see what our final thing was, and then, what we struck out, and they're gonna probably show up.
Yeah, I've gotten some calls from folks who think this is too restrictive.
Right, yeah, so we need to hear from the public, and then we can advertise something if we make it less. Okay, all right, police response to public safety concerns.
Okay, so Chief wasn't able to join us tonight, but we've been going through since the last meeting. One of the key things that we've been talking about are cameras around town. So we're trying to find out what's the best way to get cameras in around town, and it has to be we either have cellular or Wi-Fi. Those are the 2 types. We don't have Wi-Fi that's town run throughout the entire community. We originally thought, well, maybe if homeowners or businesses would sort of lend us their Wi-Fi, we could mount it and do it that way. But I think that exposes the business and the homeowner in a way where if their Wi-Fi goes out, or they didn't pay their bill, or they switch carriers, it's just a lot to manage. So we're sort of inching toward the fact that we say, okay, cellular cameras seem to be the way to go. We've got a quote for those that with the price of the camera, but it's $130 a month for the camera and the cellular subscription. So now we're going through trying to find, first of all, what the range of those cameras is, so that they can be used effectively. Throwing one at the wharf and saying we're going to pick up what's going on at the corner marks, not the way to do this. We also have to look at the whole town, not just downtown. So we're going to go through and have a real similar view of my map in there once we get the range of the cameras, and then we're going to figure out how many of them we should have, where they're going to be, and obviously we're going to have to phase this in as a budget. So, at $130 a month, we could do a few of them now without even thinking about it. I think we should. But we need to be a little bit more thoughtful and strategic. So that's what Chief is working on, is camera placement and their viability and functionality, how we're going to manage it. Some of them come with 48-hour loops, some of them are 72-hour loop. Some of them are more like game cameras that, take pictures and you get to keep 10, but the images I didn't think were all that great, but they're better at night. So we're still going through the analysis. We've gotten one company locally that can help us. We've got another company that's not local, but their price tag is like ridiculous. I mean, it would be really absurd. So we're still working through that. So that's where we are with the cameras. The officers at the academy.
We have a backup on the cameras.
Yeah.
I mean, but cities have done this all, but there are some privacy issues, and I want to make sure that the council's on board with doing this.
I was gonna raise
We,
the same question.
we need to approve this, and, you know, some people don't appreciate cameras everywhere. And, you know, they have a concern, that they should be heard, so I personally would like to hear from a little bit from the public about whether we should be doing this or not. I mean,
Well, at this point, we're still just putting a plan together, so we're not gonna spend a nickel until we get
Right,
this.
I mean, I don't have any problems, you know, but I think that at some point, people can get upset if Big Brother looking at them everywhere they're walking.
Mhm.
The other side of it is that they're saying there's no police protection.
Exactly, yeah, no, I'm just saying that we should,
Yeah, I understand the
Yeah.
privacy thing too.
yeah, I don't, not necessarily, you know, there's a balance. I'm not advocating we don't do it, I just like to hear from, let people know we're planning on doing it, that's what I'm saying. That we need to be very, you know, transparent. upfront about what we're doing. You know, it's one thing for someone, a private owner to have a camera, but the town starts
Yeah.
on board. with what we're doing.
So I'm gonna try to get 2 written plans together with cost summaries and that type of thing, and then bring it back to you folks in December rather, just for more information, and then we can, you know, maybe we have the same, I don't know if you want to have a formal public hearing or if you want to have more of a.
I think if we just put it on the agenda, make sure it's a conversation, we can have a public hearing, but it doesn't have to be an official public. hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Public comment.
we can invite public comment.
Yeah.
And I would be interested in how other towns have handled the privacy issues to be able to put parameters in place, or as far as placement or direction or the amount of time that the images are stored, or notification or whatever it is. I don't even know what the questions are.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I mean,
but-
what the
but
questions are.
There
because-
needs to, I think we need to look at that pretty thoroughly before we go throwing them out.
Okay. And see if I can do it.
That would be great.
I'll talk to, I'm sure I can find other towns that struggle with something similar and how they dealt with their cameras. I mean, a lot of the things that we're learning are like HOAs that have put up community cameras, and that's not the same.
Yeah.
So I think the point is fantastic, and I'll gladly research more. Okay.
Do you have any preliminary estimate on the number of cameras you're looking at?
It would be a lot of cameras,
Hundreds?
because we're talking about, we would be, I don't know that it would be hundreds, but, you know, but it depends on where if we decide that we're gonna do the entire town, or we're gonna just do, you know, intersections, or we're gonna do intersections with streetlights, or we're gonna do, you know, the purpose, the chief told me this, he said, the purpose of these cameras isn't gonna be specific human identification, it's gonna be finding sort of the exit route, or where they came from, where they went. This isn't really to talk about, oh, look, there's Matt, you know, wearing that ugly hat again. That's not the purpose of this. It's just more along the lines of, if there's an incident, we'll be able to look and see where they came from, where they left. But in almost any circumstance, these cameras aren't going to be so high quality that we would be able to say, oh, look, that's Ray.
Correct.
You know, so
I can understand, that could take a lot of cameras to be
it can. And that's where we have to
out
decide.
here at the intersection of North Street and Market Street. You have 4 of them.
So that's where I'm saying that this has to be much more thought through.
So, say you have 100 cameras, isn't that many?
No,
Well,
Yeah, that's my point.
they cost $100.
That's
$30 a month.
That's what I'm talking about. So
It
we're
costs
talking about spending $130 a month. on
Each
individual
month,
camera.
each camera.
That doesn't sound like a very,
Yeah, no, each month, each camera.
Right.
They're very expensive.
you have 100, it's very costly.
Right, I know, yeah,
That's-
yeah, obviously, we have a basis.
Right.
Yeah, we have a budget constriction, yeah.
Was Thelma, were you trying to say something?
I was going to say that since we were having a lot of problems in the downtown area lately, that would be our first concern, to cover that area and then work our way even further in the town. But downtown, you know, we don't want to run businesses away. So, you know, putting cameras in that area You know, 'cause as you were talking, I was thinking, just beyond Matt's story is a high telephone pole. And that a camera could shine straight down Market Street towards the North Street. And it would be able to pick up from both sides of the street, anything that's abnormal that's going on. And that in itself would give people more security about what's happening downtown. You know, we don't have to try to do the whole town at one time, but we really do need to do something.
Okay, I think, you get back to us. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Anything else about the police or Bill waiting on our two guys coming out of town?
Yeah,
And we have, also we have an ad for another police officer. And,
there's actually somebody that's moving up here from one of the cities that his wife is from here, so we're hoping to throw our arms around him.
okay, and we have some personal information too. You don't talk about that now, or you want to wait till the personal?
Oh,
That's
I'll
the
be
only,
glad to
that's the
know.
only reason you, only to talk about.
As Personnel Committee, I shared with Mayor, I talked with Chief Eric extensively and Officer Kim, they were both there, and about some of the issues that we're having. And I also spoke with Billy Murphy, who's retired from the Sheriff's Department, and he has some excellent suggestions. And I also spoke with my neighbor across the street, Bruce Taylor, who's also with the Sheriff's Department. And then Sarah Hoffman lives down the street from me, and her dad, TC, works with the Sheriff's Department. So we have a wealth of information here to draw from. And I'm going to get together with Matt and the mayor, and we're going to go over all that information.
So we're trying, what the ultimate goal to make it more attractive for to recruit people and to keep officers, right? Okay. And we're gonna have a first talk meeting. Okay. All right, is that it for police stuff? ARPA tourism grant.
Yeah, this is really just an update. Last month, I let you know that the Virginia Tourism had gotten $50 million distributed to them for tourism grants. The Accomack County had not had its allocation number yet. So Accomack County received $260,000 from the VTC. As a sidebar, Northampton received $100,000. The reason I'm putting those in there is you also know that I sit as a tourism commissioner. So we met with there are 3 DMOs in Accomack County, and there are 2 DMOs in Northampton County.
Or what's the DMO?
DMO is a destination marketing organization. You remember that was like the first thing that we applied for when I got the gig. And this is like one of the main reasons is because there are grants specifically designated for DMOs. The way that the VTC distributed this money was they said that the DMOs, so the Chincoteague Chamber of Commerce, Town of Anacostia, and the Eastern Shore Tourism Commission are the 3 DMOs in Accomack County. In Northampton County, it's the Eastern Shore Tourism Commission and Cape Charles. The county has asked that the Eastern Shore Tourism Commission be the administrating body for this grant. They just simply don't have the time, talent, resource, and that's really the commission's purpose. The DMOs are required to write letters of support for the spending plan that's submitted. So Chincoteague, Anacostia, and the Tourism Commission are going to put together a spending plan for this money. My contention, and I'm not alone in this, is that being a DMO has value and that we should get a carve-out portion of this money. Once they determine what our carve-out portion is, and the remainder would obviously be spent helping other small towns who aren't DMOs with their tourism and repeat business. So that's the way it's looking right now. So the Tourism Commission has said to Accomack County that they will be the administrating body. The 3 DMOs have circled up and started talking about spending plans. Once the allocation is determined, I will be coming back to this group saying we have X dollars. This is my prioritized list, but at the end of the day, appropriation of funds is your responsibility. But I'll let you know what funds you get to spend.
It's
Okay.
tourism.
Tourism related, very, very tourism related. This is very specific to tourism. Okay, so that's just in the works. Okay,
Public comment? No one? Okay. Committee reports, HRSD.
I'm gonna defer to Matt because he covered that in his town manager report, but I'll be glad to take on Waterfront and Planning Commission. Waterfront did meet on November the 9th. It was a relatively short meeting since our town manager was enjoying his vacation, but the upshot is that the work is closed for the season. I believe work on the pedestals has started at this point. We're still awaiting the final permitting for the bulkhead project with hope to complete that before the fall boating season. Waterfront Committee will not be meeting each and every month over winter, so if anybody is interested in attending those, please check the town website. Our chairman, Mr. Bird, will determine whether there's anything that we need to meet about or not, but we're going to take part of the winter off at least. Planning Commission met on November the 16th, last Tuesday. As you all are aware, Judith Greer had resigned from her position as chair of the Planning Commission. I see Scott Schreiber in the back row. Mr. Schreiber has graciously agreed to be chairman of the Planning Commission. So we thank him for his service. Our main order of business this past week was discussion of the ordinances related to the B districts. We really only got started with B1. You want to talk about the process being attenuated and coming up with a homestay ordinance. Wait until you see the B zoning ordinances. So I think the consensus of the group was we need to spend a lot more time on that, make sure that they align to both the comprehensive plan, but as well as the Main Street initiatives. Just a whole host of things that we need to think about. So I guess that's going to be the marching order for the next couple of months. We also discussed the rezoning application for a residential property located at 7 Hartman. It's a duplex which is owned by the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and they're selling off some of their properties in conjunction with their acquisition of the GF Horn building. This duplex has always been zoned as R1, even though it's a duplex, it should be multifamily. So it was the consensus of the Planning Commission that made perfect sense to get it correctly zoned. That will be coming to this group in December with the public hearing.
public hearing.
and the question. That's the gist of the Planning Commission meeting.
Excuse me, you went really quickly from waterfront to planning. What's a pedestal?
That's the electric
Oh,
configuration for voters to have shore power.
okay, so it's raising it.
Electric pedestals that are mounted, I guess, on the bulkhead itself and come up and with multiple plugs.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I was really glad to hear that the planning commission is going to do a new rezoning map. Because I think the one we have now, and please don't put anything in white. That is so
Right?
confusing. It's like, okay, what is that? I don't know. Thank you.
Agreed.
Mhm.
Personnel, you covered that. And mayor's report, I don't have much. I think Matt's gonna cover things. I'd like to give a shout out to Lisa for helping out with all these grant applications. I've kind of been somewhat involved in a couple of them, but they're very complicated, these grants, and she worked, we gave away a lot of money, I think,
Yes, we did.
and I think she found out ways to give more, money to these people, so thank you very much for, and any other, those committee that worked on it as well, it was, yeah, so thank you. Okay, town manager, town report.
I'll run through, you've gotten my written report and I'll make sure it's publicly available. HRSD, literally, we're still waiting on USDA and the federal. So I talked with Ted at HRSD and said, at what point do we start shaking the tree harder in Washington? Basically, his opinion, and I agree, is that if we don't receive final judgment from them by 12/31, that we'll start looking at congressional requests for inquiry. Tax season kicked off. We did well. Admittedly, the bills were printed in-house, which was for good cause. But there were a couple things we could tweak, and we'll tweak those next year, so they'll be more clear. Just as tax bills are due by December 6th. Thank you. The small business grant, you gave the appropriate thank you. I put on your table a list of all the businesses that we distributed to. We distributed to 30 businesses. We distributed $346,290.38, which made our average grant to those 30 businesses $11,543.01. In that list, we supported 6 nonprofit organizations with significant support. And then the thing I'm probably most proud of is that 75% of our awards went to SWAM businesses, which are small women and minority-owned businesses. 75% is exemplary. I mean, it's unheard of. So I'm very, very pleased about that. So we had a team who worked well. We had our final compliance review with DHCD. We went through in flying colors a lot of that because Lisa worked so hard at not only making sure the backup was done, but, you know, organizing and doing all those things beautifully. So, you know, shout outs again. That's a small business. I talked about the tourism grant. We've all learned that Lisa tendered her notice and won't be working for the town after December 31st. It's a huge loss for the town and the office. So we are starting the hiring process. We advertised this past Friday. We've got an interview team that's going to be assembled, and we're going to go through those weekly and just get this position filled as quickly as we possibly can. But we have to hire the right person. Oh, wait, were you groaning?
I don't think she knew that place was leaving.
Yeah. Move on to the water tower. The water tower project is midway. One of the things that we're trying to manage is, I don't know, I'm going to go through physics right now, sorry, but the water tower, the water that's on top of the tower, when it pressurizes the system, the reason it's up high and the water pressure from the weight from 300,000 gallons pushes the water pressure out to the rest of the system. That's how that works. Now that the water tower is empty, being painted and taken care of, we're providing water pressure with the pumps that come from the well. In order to manage that water pressure, during lunchtime and during morning shop, it gets a little bit lower. So we're trying to manage that. There are pressure release valves that you'll see around town. They're on top of about 4 or 5 different hydrants around town. When the pressure from the well pump gets too strong, it goes out that pressure release valve. The reason we do that is so that we don't blow pipes and make leaks all over town. So we're trying to keep the waste of our aquifer down to an absolute minimum. I mean, it's sad to see. So those guys are in there working as hard as they can work. It is a tough job, I have to say. But they're leaving for the Thanksgiving weekend, and then they're going to come back. It'll probably be 3 to 4 weeks after that we'll be finished. So, but that's the water tower project. We mentioned the pedestals at the wharf. The electricians coming. We've got the pedestals on site. They're going to be installed. We're working on rewriting the ordinance to develop paper roads. And the biggest thing I'm working on, and this is just an administrative burden, is we have to align our purchase policy that you guys put in 4 years ago. I have to alter that to align with 2 CFR 200, which is the federal acquisition rule, so that the monies that we spend on ARPA are using a policy that aligns with federal guidelines. Okay, so that's just going to be.
Explain that one just a little bit more.
Sure. That any federally funded project or contract has to follow, the code is 2 CFR 200. That's the federal procurement policy. We need to have a policy that aligns with that policy so that the money we spend on ARPA follows federal guidelines.
And how are the federal guidelines different from our procurement policy?
I'm typing up the checklist right now. I'm halfway through 12 pages.
Just generally, what are you seeing as you go through it?
Oh, there's nothing magic in there. There's a lot more about methodologies used for selections. You know, our policy is not wrong. I mean, we're going to be the way that I'm going to do is I'm going to update our policy with just some of the number changes, from 5,000 down to 3,500, that type of little jiggle stuff. And then, but the big one is I've got a checklist that shows for every purchase we make for ARPA, we have to go through and check off all of the standards for 2 CFR 200 to ensure that the purchase was made in accordance with federal guidelines. So that's what that's going to be working towards. So that's why the ARPA budget this month, I think we spent $287 on electrical wire, but we haven't spent any more because I need to get this policy updated before we start any further projects. Okay? And that's more of an undertaking than you care to admit. And that's what I've got. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
I forgot, Council, I forgot that we, Bob is leaving us at the end of this year, unfortunately. And so we're going to have a closed session after this meeting to appoint a new person to fill out his unexpired term, which until the next election, which will be election in November, and so the person basically getting a year. We put on the line, we put procedure for applications, and we've had 4 applications for this person. I think everybody's here. Brandon Brockmeyer, he's great. Everybody, Brandon, Willie Murphy, and Cindy Holderson here, and is Jake Gillum here? Jake, right there. Okay. So there's the 4 candidates we're going to be talking to after the meeting, and then it's council discretion whether we come back out of closed session and appoint that person tonight or wait till the next meeting. So, yeah.
But you're going to go into closed session before you do that?
No, I'm just going to draw names for the order of interview.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, let's get the council comments first. Bob,
I have nothing for tonight.
Joey?
I have a couple of questions. We're going to lose some employees who have been with the town for a very long time with HRSD transferring. And HRSD has a mandatory vaccination policy.
Currently,
And some employees who have been with this town and been loyal and learned their way up to the top are going to be just not hired. It's not dismissed and not fired, but they will not be hired. And do we have any net for that? I mean, there's no safety net. We were promised that the employees would be transferred, and we were all very happy and satisfied with that. But I feel very badly that there's somebody who's going to fall through the cracks.
that person's not falling through the cracks. We are lobbying very hard for him, and obviously I can't tell the future, but if I were looking into my crystal ball, I would say in mid-January, in all likelihood, that state mandate is going to go away. If that's the case, then they would be offered positions if he's not required to do the shot mandate.
Right, so if the transition takes place before whatever it's a December deadline, before whatever it is, if the transition takes place before that January mandate comes through, what does this person do? And another person has already accepted another position because he can't afford to be without a job, and this is looming. Well, I mean, this is wrong.
I can't do anything about HRSD
I
policy.
know, it's
Well,
their
I'm
policy. I
working
know
very hard with Ted to classify the jobs that are required. He's got 17% of his population who has chosen not to get the vaccine. He's preparing for that inevitability of staff shortages and things like that. I'm working with him to sit there and say, because I talked with VML about what we might be able to do, but we can't keep him as an employee and have him work for HRSD. That's not an option. So
Right.
their current policy is that he would not be offered a position
Right,
and he would retire. Now, he also has plenty of years to retire with dignity and he, so that part of it is,
so the safety net is that he does have a retirement plan in place.
oh, yes, and a rich one. He's been here 31 years.
Right,
So he's got like,
I just
very
don't wanna see
comfortable
them thrown
state.
away with those.
Nobody's
31
throwing
years.
anybody away. We're having, conversations a couple times a week based on what news, because at the beginning of last week, I believe it was, OSHA had a stay against the federal mandate, which is gonna push down to the state level. If after the new administration takes over, that mandate goes away, then there's no risk. So we're keeping our close eye on this. He's very important to us. He's been here a very long time, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is that you're buying the lawnmower just to take care of properties. And we've had somebody who's been doing the job for the town for a very long time as well. And it's a small business owner, and I just want to be sure that that person is well aware of your intentions so that they can make the business decisions based on the fact that we will no longer be a customer.
Yeah, I've spoken to the partner, and I haven't gotten quotes for that mower yet. I just haven't been around. So when I get the business plan and everything else laid out, and if it works the way we think, and I still get the commitment from the school, then I'm gonna sit down and talk with them. And I told them that I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Two questions. One, is there any update on the lot that the town was trying to sell or?
It's apparently not priced right, because we're not getting any nibbles. I mean, honestly, it's priced at $19,000 right now. We would easily accept 14. The parcels that just sold right around the corner were sold for like 9,500. I don't think we're that far out of it. I'm just not sure the market right now is booming for that. So it's still for sale. It's still, maybe we'll put it a little bit less. 14 is sort of our break even, but.
And then any news on the grant for the Northeast?
My most recent communication, I think I shared this, was that we had Pine Street was added to, yeah, I did share that, okay. And they were gonna be applying right around Thanksgiving. I'll touch base with Eric tomorrow, just to make sure.
The
we're
last
still
we
on
heard,
track.
the deadline was December 1st.
Yeah, and he said he'd be applying right around Thanksgiving, so I'll just, Thanksgiving this week, I'll touch base with him, make sure he has everything. I've stomped up and down on that very clearly and purposefully to say that this application needs to go through seamlessly. And he said he has everything he needs to file.
So there's been a lot of work put into that.
Yeah.
To know that,
Well,
yes, it's
no,
going
and-
in, and yes, it's complete. and Yes, we met, crossed all the Ts
Everything.
and dotted all the
Everything,
Is.
no, that, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Right? Thelma?
No, I don't have anything. You just answered my question.
Okay. Okay, all right, I'm just gonna draw names for the people that interview. So Cindy Holder, you're number one. Number two is gonna be Jake Dillon. 3 is Billy Murphy. Brandon, you're obviously the fourth one. And I suspect it's only gonna be about 10 minutes or so. Yeah, I'm not even that, yeah, so I guess you guys can hear. All right, so do we have a motion to go into closed session?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we enter a closed session pursuant to section two
I
point one
second.
3711A1 to interview and consider appointment of yes and town council vacancy.
Do we have a second on that?
Velma.
That's right, all in favor?
Yeah.
Okay, all righty, so we're gonna go from the back room here.
Sorry about my table.
Okay.